We are looking at some live pictures there. Air Force One taking off. It happened just moments ago. President Trump leaving Scotland, where he's headed for Finland, where he meet with the Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday for that highly anticipated and quite controversial summit. Well, of course, there have been many protests underway in Helsinki just even before the president arrives. He is expected to land there in just a few hours. And as I said, that much anticipated meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin just a day away now. And one major issue hanging over that meeting, Russian meddling in the U.S. presidential election. We're joining me live from Helsinki, CNN international diplomatic editor Nic Robertson and senior international correspondent Matthew Chance. Good to have you both with us. Nic, I want to start with you first. There's obviously a great deal of concern about how this one-on-one between President Putin and President Trump will go. What is the U.S. president saying about what he hopes to achieve?
You know, when he set out on this trip to Europe at the beginning of the week, he said that he thought he'd have a tough time at NATO, that it would be a tough time in the UK, and they'd have an easier time with President Putin. And I think at the beginning of the week, people sort of scratched their heads and said, what does he mean by that? Well, we've seen him go in tough at NATO. We saw him going very tough in the UK as well. So I think the indication there for his allies in Europe who are watching him is that he expected at the beginning of the week, and may well still be expecting, to give President Putin an easier time. He's indicated that he's not going to that he is going to raise the issue of meddling in the U.S. elections. Is not going to push him hard on those. Those are the indications he's given. He's played down expectations that there may be some great significant outcome at this summit. But interestingly, he's been criticizing again his allies, his NATO allies in Europe. This is what he said about the EU.
And Nic, give us a sense of whether you think President Trump will actually hold President Putin accountable, whether he'll actually say, you lied to me, we've got the evidence that your intelligence officers hacked our election.
He's certainly got the ammunition for it with that indictment. You know, the indictment that came down Friday. Perhaps he wasn't when he left Washington last week. Maybe he wasn't expecting to be able to have that in his hand. He will have heard, of course, as we all did, in a public statement from his Secretary of Homeland Security on Saturday, saying that she believes that there is Russian meddling in the current election. So President Trump has the information available, some evidence to present that he didn't have when he confronted President Putin about this a year ago in Hamburg, and he has perhaps the motivation for it because there's an indication Russia continues in this meddling. That's certainly the view from the U.S. intelligence community at the moment. But again, every indication President Trump has given is that he's not going to go in hard on this issue. He will raise the issue. He's said, you know, when it comes to President Putin, that he'll say, did you do it? Don't do it again, and President Putin will deny it. And I think there isn't anyone at the moment who would expect President Putin to put up his hand and admit it. But there is the hope from a lot of people in the intelligence community in Europe and, of course, in the United States, who would hope that President Trump will take a tough line on this issue of meddling in the elections, in the U.S. elections, because it doesn't just affect the United States. There's been meddling by Russia in European elections, too, in the elections of the United States allies.
Yeah, that is a good point you make. Nic Robertson, thanks so much in Helsinki. Just before I go to Matthew Chance, I just want to update you on the World Cup final. France versus Croatia. The first goal has been scored to France. The current score is 1-0, and we will continue to update you throughout this hour. But I want to go back to Matthew Chance now for more on that Trump-Putin summit. And Matthew, President Trump has always said that he's wanted a good relationship with Russia, and there's no doubt that he despises the Russia investigation into meddling in the U.S. election. I just want to play some sound from the U.S. president on Friday.
I think that we're being hurt very badly by the, I would call it the witch hunt. I would call it the rigged witch hunt after watching some of the little clips. I didn't get to watch too much because I'm here. It's a different time zone, to put it mildly. But after watching the people, the man that was testifying yesterday, I call it the rigged witch hunt. I think that really hurts our country, and it really hurts our relationship with Russia.
The rigged witch hunt, that is what the U.S. president was calling it. And that comment was made after he knew that 12 Russian spies were being charged with hacking the US election. Will that be music to Putin's ears?
I think it will, and I think those kinds of statements that we've heard from President Trump really since he was a candidate has given the Kremlin, an enormous amount of hope that the situation in its relationship with the United States under Donald Trump may be a lot better. Of course, they've been thwarted in that ambition so far, but you have to remember as well that the Russians use exactly the same language. They've adopted Trump's phraseology when it comes to describing the allegations against them. They also say it's fake news. They've also called the allegations that they meddled in the US election a witch hunt, and they've also said it's politically motivated. It's put about by those who are opposed to Russia and opposed to Donald Trump in order to discredit them and to prevent them from forging a better relationship. And so, even though there's all this talk at the moment and urging of President Trump to go into this meeting tomorrow in Helsinki and be much more confrontational with Vladimir Putin because he's got that evidence at his fingertips, the chances are this is something that they're actually going to agree about. They could actually bond over this shared belief that this is a witch hunt and is politically motivated. And so I think expectations are pretty low amongst people who are observing this situation closely that there's going to be a fallout between the two presidents on this particular issue of meddling.
In the lead up to this summit, we've seen President Trump playing a lot of golf in Scotland. What sort of preparation would President Putin be doing in the lead up to this? President Putin, of course, being in his position as a leader for more than 18 years.
Yes, well, I mean, in the immediate run-up to this, of course, President Putin will be, standing astride the global sporting stage, watching the World Cup final being played in the capital of his country, in Moscow. And so he'll be stepping virtually from the Luzhniki Stadium in the center of Moscow onto a plane to meet the US president. But undoubtedly before that meeting, Vladimir Putin, who I've met a number of times, is an extremely careful preparer when it comes to these kinds of meetings. He's got an incredible mastery of the facts before he goes into any sort of news conference or any kind of meeting with a foreign leader. And I think the expectation is that he's going to be very, very well prepared indeed to have this meeting with President Trump of the United States. Having said that, the fact that the meeting is taking place at all is already being seen politically as a victory by the Kremlin. Remember, they have been isolated by the international community, they've been isolated by the United States and sanctioned by the United States. And without changing any of their behavior, they have managed to secure this one-on-one summit in Helsinki with the President of the United States. And so that's a political victory in itself. They're also going to be looking for any concessions that President Trump may make. He's already hinted that he could make certain concessions over military exercises in the Baltics, and I think the Russians will take whatever's on offer.
We'll be following this very closely. Good to have you with us, Matthew Chance and Nic Robertson, joining us both from Helsinki. Thanks so much. Well, for more stories around that meeting, you can head to our website. You can read my colleague Stephen Collins' take on how the charges of the Russian meddling will affect the Helsinki talks. That can be found at CNN.com. Well, the clash for the cup is well underway. I have more on how France, Croatia and their fans are faring in the final after the break. Croatia hoping for a break as they are down 1-0. Lots more on this next.